Episode 3 of Breaking Bad is all about the question of what makes a person, and by extension, their decisions. This is the end of the first major arc and is a point of no return. Following the events of this episode, every single relationship in the series has already changed irreversibly. All we are seeing now is just the cascade of those consequences. And so we open with Breaking Bad's signature, trunk shot-esque upward framing, kinda like through the glass, like we saw with the bathtub in the prior episode. In the context of this episode though, putting us underneath that strawberry jam, I think is mainly there to provide this immediate visceral sense of how absurdly messed up Walter's actions are, even now. And also, note how vibrant the colors are. The strawberry jam, the gloves, the apron, they all immediately pop. And that is then juxtaposed by this cold, almost monotone blue as Walter and Gretchen calmly write out the chemical compounds that make up a human body. It's a really chilling reduction of what life is, as if it were just a scientific experiment. Obviously, in the context of their conversation, it really was just a science conversation. But it's that juxtaposition that makes us see those chemical compounds that really makes us zero in on that missing 0.111958%. During this episode, Walter will be forced to find that mass. Mass that is entirely intangible and one that cannot be explained away no matter how much he tries.
What about the soul?
And that is further emphasized with another great juxtaposition. As Walter flushes down the forbidden berry smoothie, the past Walter keeps insisting that
there's got to be more to a human being than that.
We'll loop back to this point because this episode is cyclical and we don't actually hear the end of this conversation, but point is, this episode is all about forcing Walter to reduce his perception of humanity to just math and chemistry.
There's nothing but chemistry here.
This cold and ruthless pragmatism is a must in a lab setting, but in the real world, not so much. People are messy, relationships are messy, and you can't just slot around everything like currency. That is that missing 0.111958%. The soul that makes Walter care about Krazy and not view him as just chemistry. More on that later in the episode. Also, fun fact, just in case anyone is from the 2010 era of the internet where these fun creepy stories were shared around 24/7, the whole thing about a human body becoming like 21 grams lighter after death is just bad science, and it became an urban myth because it sounded kinda cool. I won't get into it now, but there's a lot of reading you can do on it. It's the same thing as with Walter's missing percentage here. Even ignoring the tiny measurement errors, the supposedly missing percentage and mysterious things are just tiny amounts of ultra-trace elements and so on. It makes for really interesting television to talk about these missing 21 grams and missing percentages, but it's not exactly realistic. Also, just in case anyone is wondering, I spent like a good half an hour trying to find out if there's any significance behind that 0.111958%. And unfortunately, I don't think there is literally anything. Even asking our AI overlords, the only thing they can come up with is this episode of Breaking Bad, so yeah. The only noteworthy thing here that is 1,000,000% a coincidence is that the hex code of the color is a deep blue. It doesn't match the light blue that we normally associate with Walter's secret formula, but it does match Walter's shirt when he talks about Gretchen and all the billions with a B that he missed out on. And I guess it also kinda matches the tone of this entire scene, it's also a monotone blue. But whatever the case, I don't think it has any deeper meaning, and with that, roll intro. Moving into the episode, we open with Marie visiting Skylar, and well, not exactly being helpful. She is ranting about her shoes, which becomes a whole nother throughline in this episode, and she also asks, why isn't Walter doing the painting, which is just another small thing to show that their family life isn't really going all that well post Walter's diagnosis. Most importantly though, Skylar peers into the future and sees just how many memes would be made of her, and so she just has to warn Walt Jr.
My name is Skylar White, yo.
Please don't say yo.
And another important thing here is Skylar's very, very bad attempt at lying about writing a character who smokes pot. Marie immediately assumes that she is talking about Walt Jr. because, as she herself would later say, this really is a "my friend is struggling with this." Like, yes, I'm sure this is a question about your friend, I'm sure he also goes to a different school. This whole pot side quest is one of those minor points of drama in the season, but I think it's mostly there to, 1, sketch in Hank's views on this kind of stuff and how that then translates into Walt Jr.'s, 2, to have this super early crystal clear link between Walter and Jesse, like we've already seen, and most importantly 3, to sketch in Marie's almost childlike desire for control and how that shapes her behavior as well as her faults. Her entire life is defined by this need to control. From telling Skylar that she has missed a spot while painting, to trying to butt into Walt Jr.'s life with her whole scared straight thing, and even things like her stealing the shoes is all about this pursuit of dominance. On the surface, she just seems a little quirky and a little sassy.
Need to be wearing footies before you try those on?
I'm extremely clean.
But when she steals the shoes, and a number of other things later in the series, it's a pretty big crack in that clean facade that she presents, especially with her color scheme being that royal purple. She can have her consistent colors and beautiful house decor. She might even, sometimes rightfully, spotlight outright. But underneath all of that is a almost self-destructive drive for control. Also, real quick, when I'm reading off of a script, I think my IQ drops by like 40 points, so if I accidentally call Marie Mary, it is what it is, we're just gonna roll with it, we're never gonna mention it. Yes, she's now Marie. Or Mary. See what I mean? Also, bonus fact, scared straight programs are, at best, ineffective and, at worst, downright harmful. Bad idea, it doesn't work, but I guess that also does kinda fit Marie's vibe. It gives the illusion of doing something really big and something really impressive, but really, it's an illusion that sometimes even does bad. Bravo, Vince, you have done it again. Also, absolutely overanalyzing here, but I think you could also see her white gown as a almost shield. In the same way she says that she's very clean and doesn't need socks, she has this white gown that tells everyone just how clean she is. The reality is of course much different. Returning to our main dynamic duo, we see them wash each other in the inflatable pools, which, as we talked about before, might actually be the exact kind of plastic Walter needed in the first place, so that is kinda funny. Another interesting point of contrast here is Walter flushing down the forbidden smoothie down the toilet, and then flushing Krazy 8's little potty bucket down the toilet as well. It's again just contrasting life with death. And also, if you remember all the title discussions we had last time, the toilet here could be seen as the metaphorical river, with Walter now flushing away the last remnants of their secrets. It's actually not the last remnants because Krazy 8, but you get what I mean. As for Walt and Krazy, this is where the episode really starts pressing Walt's psyche with his next decision regarding life and death. Krazy calls him out saying what they're doing is just degrading. Which, yes, it is. We literally have laws banning most instances of keeping dogs on chains. What Walter is doing is like infinitely worse. But the most important thing here is Krazy calling Walter by his name, clearly adding another very big point of complexity to Walter's decision. Letting him go would already be a very risky move, but if he already knows his name, I mean, tracking him down at that point would be easy peasy. And with this name thing, we also see a very interesting aspect of Walter's character. Obviously, he wants to stay completely in the shadows and be entirely anonymous because, you know, crimes. But as we all know, Walter is a bit of a walking contradiction, with him also wanting everyone to know the name of Heisenberg.
How do you know my name?
You all know exactly who I am. Now, say my name.
Obviously, there is a very big difference between knowing his real name and knowing his title, but if you really wanted to fly under the radar, well then, having your title out there is also probably not a good idea, as we see later in the series. Following this, Walter just kinda crashes out big time, and we get another sequence of accidental comedy genius as Walter battles Jesse. But Walter's entire crash out is also interesting from the perspective of both of them kind of being right. The problem is neither of them are just able to admit fault, and that is a perfect cocktail for drama. And with Walter, this would of course just continue to escalate and his crash outs would just become worse and worse. Yes, Jesse did mess up here, but he is also correct in saying that his house is not exactly pleasant anymore. And he is also correct in saying that Walter still hasn't done his part in the deal. Not to mention the fact that he was the one to drag him into this to begin with.
Your job is waiting for you in that basement, as per the coin.
As of now, the consequences of Walter's big crash out are not that big. But again, this episode is largely the one that fully upsets that delicate balance that he had made thus far. And well, things are about to get really messy. Also, I already talked about the Marie shoe shopping incident, but this scene right here is absolute gold.
a delicate subject, so I need you to focus and...
Sit down! Sit down! Sit down!
Speaking of old Mineral Man, we cut to him and Walt Jr. at a not-so-good-looking motel, with a bunch of shady-looking individuals immediately scrambling as they see the black SUV. As per Marie's request, Hank duped Walt Jr. into this scared straight adventure, which is frankly diabolical. Bro expected ice cream and got a lecture about something he doesn't even care about or know about. That's like, really not cool. Memes aside though, Hank talks about the so-called gateway drugs, saying every single time it's marijuana. Because I am the overanalysis man, I of course had to see if there's any kind of consensus on this and whether or not the concept of this gateway drug is even legit. And well, no one really knows. Many argue that alcohol and nicotine are much more likely to function as these gateways, and if you look at behavioral patterns when someone drinks alcohol as opposed to smoking, well, alcohol is like infinitely worse, and the only reason people don't care is because it's been normalized in society over thousands of years. At the same time, there are also signs that it could change the brain's reward system, which may then start a cascade that leads into even harder substances, which is doubly true considering the social factor of likely being around these substances. So in conclusion, there is no conclusion. At least not from me, because, I mean, who am I? I'm a goofy man on the internet. What's very funny here is seeing Hank play the I'm going to act totally cool as if I already know absolutely everything and you don't even need to tell me anything. But like, Walt Jr. is kind of just sitting there and he has literally no idea what's being talked about, why he's even here. Bro just wanted ice cream. And what's also hilarious is Hank calling Wendy.
Don't think so hard, it's gonna hurt your brain.
Definitely overanalyzing here, but I think it's also interesting how this scene right here is largely a representation of the entire series. We have Hank, who is extremely confidently wrong about a family member and their involvement in the shadier parts of the world. But at the same time, literally within shouting distance, we see Jesse, the smoking gun that would eventually blow this entire thing wide open. And with Walter is the same thing. One side of him is this completely calm dude, aka Hank, looking in at the madness that is the drug trade. But the other side of him is living that madness, aka Jesse. And speaking of, as we return to Walter, we see him writing out a pros and cons list of sorts in how to deal with Krazy. Just like with the series premiere, he is pantsless and at his most vulnerable, because that's what this is. He literally writes out, murder is wrong for himself. Something that is borderline comedic to even have to write out, but I mean, look at what they've done already. Walter realizes that he is slipping, and as we pan up, we see all kinds of reasons listed out. From religious principles to purely practical concerns, there are a lot of them. But as we pan right, we get a bit of a showstopper. He'll kill your entire family if you let him go. And well, isn't that a conundrum? All of these arguments against just one. But that one is, well, that is everything. And if we look back to the start of this episode, it even further accentuates that cognitive dissonance within Walter. Chemistry should be firm and rigid. Math doesn't change, it is always reliable, and there is no room for any emotion or any opinion. But here, it is that missing 0.111958% that just keeps haunting him. Looking at this pros and cons list right now, there is only one correct option for him. He knows it, and it is all just chemistry. Right? But it's not. We also see another case of Walter inadvertently digging himself a even deeper grave. When he talks to Skylar, he says that, oh, I got caught up with the car wash and, I need to finally figure out how I'm working, yada yada. But Skylar just says that, yeah, that's interesting considering you quit 2 weeks ago. Which, if she was scared about her husband just randomly disappearing these past couple of days, well then, now she is big mad because he is lying and failing spectacularly. He told her about the pot, so this must be something even worse, right? It's just great drama because there is suffering on really every side here. Walter is struggling with doing horrible things for his family, but Skylar is growing ever more scared about what's going on with Walter, and she pushes him away because of those lies. There is still a baby on the way, there's already a whole web of lies, parts of which Skylar has already uncovered. It's just a lot of things all at once, pulling them in completely opposite directions. 10 out of 10 absolute cinema. After the phone call, Chef Heisenwald is back in the house with him preparing a sandwich for Krazy. A few things to know with the sandwich. Yes, I'm being serious, we're gonna analyze the sandwich. Number 1, he removes the crusts as per Krazy's preference, which, as we talked about last time, eventually becomes a trait that he himself absorbs. Which, number 2, this is Walter hiding behind that sense of normalcy and humanity. He has locked him up worse than a prisoner, and he knows full well that, again, there is only one way out of this. But still, he tries to act as everything's just normal and he's a good guy making food that he likes. And finally, the most important point, number 3, who the hell uses toasty cheese slices as just cheese? Like bro, there is a reason why it can't legally be called cheese. You don't eat it raw. That is disgusting. It's like a piece of plastic. You have to melt it, that's when it becomes tasty. Why would you eat it like that? And most importantly, number 4, for all of you who enjoy cooking and have a nice set of knives you look after, please enjoy this little montage. Walter, my guy, you're a smart dude. Why would you do that? Why would you ruin the knife? Why? Just get a cutting board, Jesus, Walt. Memes aside, there is also some duality with the knife itself. This is the same knife that Walter almost used as a weapon, whereas now, he is again making food for Krazy. And finally, we have the yellow plate, which, as we've discussed before, the color yellow is the constant signifier of the drug business and a lot of the time, the suffering that brings. Krazy 8 has a yellow jacket, Jesse's rip is a lot of the time yellow as well, the hazmat suits, Gus's employees, a lot of the warning labels. Yellow is all about the meth business and the suffering that it brings. And in this situation, well, this is Walt's first deal gone really, really wrong. After taking a brief nap on the ground, Walter returns with another sandwich and, for the first ever time, admits that he has lung cancer. I've always found this part of people fascinating, because why is it so easy to share secrets with someone you literally just met, but not with anyone that is important to you? A lot of research has gone into this, with much of it apparently just being the perceived lack of consequences and judgments, but I think it's another really poignant moment in this episode. Walter shares what is easily one of the most personal secrets you could ever have with the man that he knows he has to kill. He has completely given up on finding another path himself. Now, he's just gonna sit back and kind of see what happens.
I don't know, but you gotta convince me.
Another brilliant detail here, to even further up that emotional tension, is Walter starting to call Krazy by his real name. That is another layer of detachment that Walter could have used, gone. He is now forced to acknowledge that this isn't just a dealer with the title of Krazy 8. He is Domingo, a person with his own preferences, his own dreams, goals, family. And that is exactly what they talk about, with Walt jokingly asking whether his business degree helps in the drug trade and generally talking about where they're from and all kinds of other things. Thing is, we know Krazy 8 is an informant, so it's no coincidence that we can contrast this junkie like Wendy to this dude who has a degree, is extremely well-spoken, he is fully aware of the predicament he finds himself in, and keep in mind, if Walter didn't suddenly get blasted by future memories, Krazy 8 would have won. He duped Walter 100%. But let's not jump ahead, because he then notes that he was originally going to study music, but his dad talked him out of it because there was supposedly no money in it. This split between pursuing passions and making money is another point of connection for Walter, since he too missed out on
Billions, with a B.
He was that 1 in a million rock star that Domingo's dad talked about, but Walter missed that shot, and so here we are. They then talk about the furniture store, which, again, Walter knows, and it becomes yet another point of familiarity between them. And even more so, Walter then notes that he might have bought a bassinet there.
We don't sell bassinets there. We do used to sell cribs.
A crib, then. Okay, crib.
First off, he knows what the difference between a bassinet and a crib is, something that Walter himself even didn't. This isn't some drug lord who only knows violence. He's a smart dude with a business degree, he's into music, he has worked in this furniture store. He is just like Walter, he just got caught up in something really, really bad along the way. That is literally Walter right now. So how can he, well, end him? And number 2, it also directly links the thought of Walter's own children to Krazy, which is crazy.
Small world.
It is.
The paths we take, huh?
This too has double meaning, since Krazy is also an informant for Hank personally, so yes, this is a very, very small world, and if Krazy were to be let go, well, him going after Walter is kinda the least of his worries. But as soon as they talk about Walter's cancer, Krazy quickly connects the dots. He immediately says that you must be cooking because you want to leave money for your family, then joking that he'd happily write him a check right now. Considering he already has that shard of plate, this is just like super dark because he's lying. He's going to stab him. That is all kinds of messed up. Now, is there a possibility that he could have offered Walter some kind of negotiation, maybe with the DEA, maybe just with him? Who knows? But point is, right now he is playing Walter 100%, even fully knowing that he's doing all of this for his family. That is super messed up.
I don't know what to do.
You do?
As he goes for the key, something primal goes off in his brain. Maybe it's what Jesse said about pretending to be knocked out and just searching for a weapon. Maybe he just noticed the plate, but something tells him, stop. As the key and the plate sit side by side, he puts the pieces together. It is a decision between saving a life and taking it. A puzzle to find that missing percent that makes a human. The fractured plate is Walter's now fractured life. The missing piece now being that massive shard with a very, very pointy end. Walter's life has already descended to just violence.
Don't do this. Why are you doing this?
He is in full-on denial. He doesn't want to believe it. He digs through the trash, hoping, praying that he's going to find it, but he never does. And so, the door creaks open, with Walter's silhouette being pitch black. But as Walter asks one last question, and still sees that Krazy is the same upbeat guy he was a second ago, he confirms for one last time that, yes, he just got played.
I'm so sorry.
The somewhat tragic thing about this entire Krazy 8 escapade is that it validates Walter's cruel worldview. If Krazy, no not Krazy, Domingo, managed to play him, well then, who else can? And so, the only conclusion he can arrive to is...
There's nothing but chemistry here.
There is no missing percentage. There is no soul. It is all just chemistry. It's this inhumane worldview, completely devoid of any value for life, that would twist Walter into something unrecognizable. And with that, we smash cut to just a normal day. An ambient background track plays as people are just living life. Most of this episode lacked these kinds of establishing shots, open spaces, or really life as a whole. We were trapped in the house right alongside Walter. So I think with this shot right here, there is the sense of almost catharsis, but also unease. Something just changed, but no one knows what. And I think that is captured beautifully with Jesse timidly walking through the house and just finding the bike rack. He knows more or less what has happened, but it is still just weirdly chilling. And in a similar vein, as we got to class, we see the principal walk in and say that Walter is apparently not doing so well. Obviously, your mind will immediately jump to, well, Walter just did something absolutely diabolical, so he's probably taking a little bit of a breather. But in the first episode, we already saw how Walter just doesn't really skip work at all. He had like a throat thing, he still went to school, and based on what we know about Walter, it really does seem like no matter what happens, he will always be there. So yes, it is Walter just doing something diabolical and taking a day off, but for Walter, that is like a much bigger deal than you might initially assume. But she also says that they're going to be watching a very interesting video on carbon.
Very important stuff.
Okay, real talk, you know when the teacher was bringing out the CDs, it was gonna be a good day. Granted, I'm not a boomer, so actual TVs were no longer really a thing and we had like projectors and those big smart whiteboards, but still, it was absolutely peak lazy days. What is not so peak lazy days is what we see in the desert with Hank. Luckily for old Walt, a fire has burned away some of the evidence, but not all the evidence, and not the single most important thing. Hank first finds a stash of crystal with him saying that it's way too white, almost as if it were made by Mr. White. Okay, that's not funny. But much more importantly, another officer calls to them with the mask they left behind in the desert. So, linking your school to a cook site? Not exactly smart, Walter. And just like that, Walter's race against time has started. He sits atop a bridge, watching the traffic whizzing by, each car a second of his remaining life zooming past. This is where the episode goes full circle and Walt denies the existence of a soul. Because, yes, after killing Krazy 8, all there is money and there is chemistry. He now has to grapple with getting just enough time to make enough money for his family. All morals and ethics were left in that basement. From now on, he just has one goal. And so, he returns home. He slowly walks into Skylar's room and says that he must tell her something. That something, of course, being his diagnosis. He will savor what he has left, he will get treatment, and he will try his best to repair his family. But in the meantime, and after a few swings and roundabouts, well, he will end up throwing aside absolutely everything just to make money. Walter has cracked the ice, he has woven a spider web, call it whatever, but this is a point of no return, and most of Walter's actions beyond this point are largely reactive rather than proactive. As for how he'll deal with all of these next roadblocks, well, that's for later in the season. And with that, that is episode 3. I've already mentioned it a few times in the video, but this is kind of what I view as the first real episode of Breaking Bad, where the entire prologue is kind of wrapped up, and now, well, now it's time to get into a lot of drama and a lot of consequences of a lot of very, very bad decisions. But yes, just like episode 2 was an incredible follow-up to the pilot of the series, episode 3 just keeps that momentum, and now we're seeing Walter challenged in ways that we might not have even imagined just a few episodes prior. His transformation from episode 1 to episode 3 feels very real and very grounded. We go through all of those emotional peaks and valleys, but it is also kinda breakneck. Especially when rewatching the series, people always ask the question of, when did Walter become Heisenberg? Which I think is kind of a silly question, but whatever. This episode, like, to me, is kinda like, yeah, he's already doing things that are kinda Heisenberg-ish. Like, the whole, it's just chemistry? Like, that is peak cinema. But anyway, with all that being said, next time we'll be getting a whole bunch more family drama and eventually getting back in the lab. So, I hope to see you back as we continue overanalyzing Breaking Bad. And that's the video. 2 Breaking Bad videos in 1 year? Crazy to think about, I know. Goofs aside though, usual reminder of all the other things I do. I'm still playing through Dark Souls 2 on Twitch, and we also talk about all kinds of news. For example, Vince Gilligan's next series called Breaking Bad 2077. You heard it here first. That's a joke, by the way, we don't know what the series is called, but there is a Vince Gilligan series. But anyway, with that, I want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. And let's also give a warm welcome to the newest members of the team, Carlos and Disco Lunk, I think? Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my rambling, so seriously, thank you, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!